Welcome back, everybody. This is not an update on the state of the Malazan Empire because it's Saturday and I'm gonna do a bit of a more rambly general Malazan thing. And the thing I want to talk about today is why Malazan gets broken characters right, unlike a lot of other fantasy. So let's get this over with. Cheers. Now, when we look at fantasy literature in general, it is the case that the idea of the broken character or the somehow damaged character has made its way into fantasy literature over time. There's obviously like very early, like not very early, but it has shown up. I guess the first somehow damaged character is Thomas Covenant. I'm not going to go into that here because I'm not an expert on Thomas Covenant, but the guy has leprosy at the beginning of the books. And the question of how to deal with damage is something that has been around for a while, but it's taken a while for it to be explored more widely. Now, when you go and look at the Game of Thrones, like A Song of Ice and Fire, then obviously we have broken characters in there. We have several characters that struggle with inner, like with handicaps of all kinds. You have your guys like Tyrion Lannister, who is small and has other physical I don't want to say defects, but has visibly physical handicaps and stuff like that. And then you have your Bran Stark, who is lame because he fell out of a window or was pushed out of a window. We have a bunch of those people showing up there, but it is, I feel, it follows a certain way of dealing with brokenness in characters that I find personally problematic after a while. Because what we see in a lot of these books, and there's obviously more of that later on in, I don't know, your Joe Abercrombie has broken characters that torture a dude whose name I keep forgetting, for example. Is it Dan Van Glock? But you know who I mean. That torture a dude who's also like broken and shit like that. We have a lot of these characters showing up since fantasy found it was cool to be grim and dark and grimdark and dirty, and everything is all in brown and gray and muddy and all of that. As if as if the people in Tolkien's books weren't also damn muddy after walking all the way through, I don't know, your swamps before Mordor, for example. But that doesn't matter. At some point in the 90s or 2000s, people felt it was cool if people were dirty, muddy, and broken, either psychologically or even physically broken. And that is something that we obviously also see in the Malazan world. We have a plethora of people from all walks of life with all kinds of backstories. That means we also have quite a few people who have suffered physical or mental trauma that is influencing their decisions, their actions, and so forth. But I would argue that Malazan does it in a better way, or a way that feels more realistic to me in a way, or in that case, more real. I think real sounds better than realistic, because realistic is a very difficult word in these circumstances. Because arguably there are people similar to what, I don't know, George R. R. Martin describes with Tyrion or Bran, and people that then try to overcome their handicaps in certain ways, or go out of their way to balance out their handicaps in life and try to overcompensate in a way, as you see with your Tyrion Lannister, who is like super smart and witty because it's the only thing he can do, because obviously he's not a really brutal fighter or whatever. You have that going on, but I feel And then you have those people, overcoming their disabilities, their handicaps over time and becoming your heroes, that kind of thing. Um, but and I don't want to say that those people don't exist. I'm pretty sure they exist somewhere. But I feel that the way I feel that Malazan does it better than a lot of other series that, like, at least in fantasy, there is obviously more stuff out there in your general, literary fiction, stuff like that. But I feel like, as I said, the broken people within Malazan feel more real. And one of the ways I feel we can, at least for me, I can tell, or from why they feel more real for me, is that it is so much harder to read those characters, like your Felicin, your Heboric, your Maibi. Although the Maibi is maybe a sort of a special case, but I'll take her in the same area, because what I see as brokenness, or how I would define brokenness within a world like the Malazan world, would manifest itself, because it's the way I feel about my personal disabilities. Brokenness, I've said this before in a different video, is about agency, or a lack of agency. And the point where you have the feeling that the universe in general, not a evil force out there or whatever, but the universe has played you real bad, and you're suffering the consequences, and there's very little you can do about it. And now this is a very broad definition, but I feel that it's a more fruitful way to approach it than just to describe the physical limitations or the mental limitations of a specific handicap. That's, yeah, it would be fun to have like pages and pages and pages on Heboric dealing with the fact that he doesn't have any hands. And we might get the point that, yes, having no hands is a severe disability, a severe handicap in everyday life, much more so, for example, than blindness is for me. But it that wouldn't bring us closer, because the actual point there is that in any case you feel, or it's very easy to feel, that the universe has been unfair to you, has treated you poorly, and you have to deal with that. And the consequence then often, at least very often in certain ways, is a bitterness, a rage, an anger at the universe. In general, I personally feel that very strongly. Sometimes I get real mad at the universe, and the results of this are often rather problematic for myself, because I usually, yeah. Okay, quick aside, then we go back to the Malazan stuff, is I'm a rather rebellious, contrary bastard, basically. It's like, you tell me to do something, chances are I do the opposite. You tell me that I can't do something, chances are really high that I'm going to try anyway. And that is obviously, that can be seen as a very positive quality, but it has a lot of really painful consequences in my case, for example, because I do stuff like, I run into shit, and then I have scars in my face, and I bleed all over the place because I'm once again not careful enough. And yes, there is that problem that, yes, if you're blind, maybe you shouldn't run all the time, or maybe, those kind of things. Or if you're blind, maybe you shouldn't, and don't speak any word of Italian, and don't know shit. Maybe you should not stand alone on a train station in Parma at 9 in the morning, still half drunk from last night's concert and after show party, and have no ticket to get to Milan, which is stupid. And there's ways to work around that, but let's just say it's not always really smart. But I feel, and that's something that you can see, or that resonates with me when I read the Malazan stuff, a lot of these characters make very, like, that you as a reader, a distanced reader, see as wrong or spiteful, petty, or problematic reactions to things. Felicin is one of those, very much one of those characters. Obviously, I'm not comparing myself in any way to her, but the point is that her arc in mostly Deadhouse Gates is very much about her lashing out and being spiteful and doing irrational things, sometimes irrational things. Similar things happen, obviously, with Heboric on a different level, and he's more philosophic about it because he's probably because he's older and has been put through the ringer in a different way. But but still, that's what I mean. Is like the fact that not everyone who deals with with brokenness in any way in his personality, in his personal life, not everyone like that will just overcompensate, become very brilliant in a different way, and then redeem himself or herself. That's not how this works. A lot of times people react differently to that. People react in a more problematic way. People go and do stupid things that will just hurt them more and more. That's just how human beings work. And when I read those characters, and I feel a lot of people, talk about that maybe the Maybe storyline is a very difficult one to read, or the Felicin and Deadhouse Gates storyline is a very difficult one to read. There's a lot of those, and people are like, those are terrible to read, and then people go and translate that into hating those characters or disliking those characters a lot. And once again, there's this amazing video that Graceless Passion did on the in defense of Felicin, and it's a very good one. But I feel the point there is that these storylines are so terribly hard to read because they force us to acknowledge the fact that they force us to acknowledge brokenness in a very, very different way than these broken characters, or arguably broken characters in in Game of Thrones or The First Law, or a lot of other of those books force us to deal with it. They force us to acknowledge that people, even though they deserve our feeling, they deserve our empathy and compassion, that doesn't mean that automatically within their personal arc they are redeemed. That doesn't automatically happen. It could happen, but sometimes it just doesn't, because that's how the world works in that area. And I feel to acknowledge that, to acknowledge brokenness, to realize that it's there and that it won't be changed by magic or whatever, and to face up to the individual weakness. And weakness is not a good word for that. To face up to the jaggedness of a character, to face up to the fact that something is fundamentally broken within that character, and there's not gonna be a way to just turn that into irrelevancy and make it irrelevant. To acknowledge that is very, very difficult for each and every one of us as readers. For me, it rings very, very true and comes close to home. But I feel for a lot of other readers, it also is a problem, because it also forces us to acknowledge the fact that these kind of things can happen, and it forces us to acknowledge weakness, or perceived weakness is a better word there, to acknowledge perceived weakness and perceived brokenness, because we as human beings are still conditioned to push brokenness or weakness or damage in other people away from us. It's deeply, deeply ingrained, and there's all kinds of studies, psychological, historical, and so forth out there on why we as societies do that. It's deeply ingrained, though, however, and reading about those characters and being forced into their shoes, and then seeing them make mistake after mistake after mistake, is something that can be hard, it can be painful, it can be difficult to deal with and to acknowledge. And I think and I feel that this is a reason why a lot of people hate characters like Felicin. Maybe like there's also obviously the point Felicin is a young girl, and a lot of fantasy readers seem to have problem with or go much harder on young female characters. That's just a thing that is unfortunately still true, and there's a lot of discussion on to be had on why that is the case. I mean, I don't want to go that route right now, become political, but just make that check in your mind. Would you, if you don't like Felicin, would you hate her the same if she was a young boy? If she was Paran's younger brother and not her younger sister? His younger sister? Would people react the same way? I don't know. Anyway, that just like not where I want to go with this, but I feel the main reason there, the main issue why a lot of these people are these characters like Felicin or the maybe are not well liked in a way is that they what they first do is they incite our feelings, our pity in a way, our empathy, our compassion, and then they do the thing that is hard to swallow because, and this is something that you then have in this amazing discussion with, I think it's Paran and Silverfox, maybe, probably Silverfox in Memories of Ice. The point there, and this is basically the crux there, is we feel that if we give our empathy and compassion to someone because of their brokenness, we then kind of expect subconsciously, because of how our societies are wired, basically, we expect them to, I don't know, show some, not gratitude, but some acknowledgement of that, or we expect them to then change. It's like we give them compassion, things will become better. But it's very hard to sustain our empathy, our compassion towards someone who continues to make like mistakes, do stupid things or things we perceive as stupid and lash out to, and we then start to weigh up their character flaws with their like brokenness. It's like, oh, well, they're broken and terrible things have happened to them, but they're also an asshole, so I don't feel as compassionate at this point. And there is this great quote in Memories of Ice was like, compassion is never earned. It has to be freely given. So it can also not be, taken away, or like the point where we evaluate someone and evaluate whether we give compassion to someone. Well, the point where we evaluate that or like judge whether someone is worthy of compassion by their actions and not by their sheer existence and the things that happen to them. That's the point where we basically can scrap the whole thing. And I feel that that's a very important message within these characters, and the fact that that it shows us these things so clearly is one of the reasons why a lot of people are uncomfortable with those storylines. But that makes them arguably so very, very important, because to be able to read those things, then think about why you don't like a character and face the fact that maybe it says something about you or me or us as readers. It tells us more about us readers than it tells us about those characters, that we don't like those characters, that we feel uncomfortable with those characters, with their character arcs. That's something that I feel a lot of those more broken characters within the Malazan world, within the Malazan Book of the Fallen, that those characters manage to do, and that manage to move us. And that's something that a lot of those broken characters in other books and other fantasy books don't achieve, because there the brokenness just becomes another, thing, another goal, another roadblock to be overcome within the character arc. And that's not what it is. It's something that stays with the character. Brokenness is not something that you can overcome. It will always. That's the sad truth that you need to acknowledge, that we as people need to acknowledge. Brokenness is something you cannot overcome. It will always stay with you. You can make sure or try to not let it influence every decision, and not let it overcome your entire personality. But that's the only thing there. You're never going to win against it. The only thing you can do is fight it to a standstill and push it, you know, and your victory in that case will be to not give it power over you, but it will still remain with you. And that's a very, very hard truth to acknowledge. And what a lot of these other characters, like a lot of other fantasy books, do is they make it just another thing a character overcomes and grows as a character, and then that flaw is magically taken away, or they get some kind of gimmicky thing that then helps them to overcome it, yeah, and can, mind meld with their wolf or whatever. That's like, yeah, that's cool, and that's a nice story, but that's not how it works. And that's why I would say that these broken characters within the Malazan world feel more real to me, because they speak to me in a way where I recognize myself, and I recognize the things that are terrible about me, that make me sometimes a terrible person, because obviously I do lash out, I do stupid shit, and I'm like, it's easy to forget that about yourself, but once you are confronted with that kind of thing within a character that you're reading now, it forces you to actually look at those things, and that's what I mean when I say it feels real to me. And it's something that I feel Steven Erikson manages in a way that very few authors within the fantasy genre manage that well. Okay, I hope I made kind of clear what I wanted to say today. It's been a more rambly, freeform kind of thing. I'll be back tomorrow with a video either on me ranting on the problems I have with hard magic systems and why they suck, or with a video on why you all should read Our Lady of Darkness by Fritz Leiber, and you should all read that book. So I'll think of something until then, and knit my leg warmers, and I'll talk to you tomorrow. Until then, cheers.